Welcome everyone to Discover This. Well, today we're going back and doing another history lesson, and this one's going to be on Camp Grant out in the Arizona desert. And this was from back in the old days with the Indians were causing a lot of violence, and the United States government sent troops out here to help protect the settlers and the miners and things. And out here at Camp Grant there ended up being a big massacre of the Indians, the Native Americans. So that's the story we're going to discuss today. A little bit of history that you don't hear about too much, but we're going to cover it today. So let's go check it out.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So this is Highway 77. This little road here tees into that. And this is the entrance to Central Arizona College. And right here at the intersection is the monument sign for the old Camp Grant. So I'm not sure if the sun's gonna allow us to read that on the camera, but we'll do our best. But basically 1860 to 1873, Camp Grant was here at this site, actually where the college is now. We'll go over there, but this is really the only remnant of the old Camp Grant, is this marker right here. Well, it's not even a remnant actually, it's just a memorial more than anything. So out here in this area here, there used to be a military post constructed in May of 1860. It was first called Camp, and I'm going to mispronounce this, but I'll spell it at the bottom there, Camp Aravipa. And then in August of 1860, it was renamed Fort Breckenridge. From 1860 to 1873, the post was either abandoned or destroyed and rebuilt many times. In 1866, it was named Camp Grant. Now, the 1853 Gadsden Purchase had assigned the United States nearly 30,000 square miles of northern Mexico territory in what is now southern Arizona and southern New Mexico in exchange for $10 million. Apache groups of the area here, until then, they were at war with each other and with Mexico, now also became antagonists to the U.S. government's goals of settling the western United States. Deprived of their land and driven to starvation, the Apaches retaliated against what they perceived to be an invasion. As new settlers arrived in the area, the U.S. government set up forts and military camps to ensure their protection. And that was, you know, farmers and ranchers and miners and all that came to this area here. Apache peoples ended up in two groups. One which continued to fight the settlers by raiding settlements, and a second group which requested protection from the U.S. government. So there was a lot of violence between the primarily Apaches and the new Arizonans. The United States government sent troops out here to help protect the miners and the farmers. The Apaches resented the troops being here, that one particular group did, and segregating them to different reservations. The Apaches resorted to raids where they killed settlers, stole cattle, food, and other things. The United States Army tried to negotiate with various tribes, but mostly to no avail. The Apaches didn't trust the government, and the government really was trying to place them in certain areas and monitor where they could and couldn't go. So that's kind of a broad overview of what was going on out here in other western states, not just here in Arizona. In 1871, a Lieutenant Royal Whitman took command of Camp Grant, and in February of 1871, 5 Apache women came into the camp to find one of their sons who had been taken prisoner. Lieutenant Whitman fed them and treated them so well that other Apaches started showing up and wanting food and care. So Lieutenant Whitman created a separate camp for the Apaches about 5 miles southeast of this location of Camp Grant. Approximately 500 Apache ended up living at that camp. They cut hay for the soldiers' horses, they worked in the barley fields for the local farmers. Now, Lieutenant Whitman knew that peace between the government troops and the Apache wouldn't last forever, and he encouraged the Apache leaders of that particular camp to move their people along to the White Mountains. But that request was refused. Keep in mind, other Apache had still been conducting raids on ranches and farms, killing settlers and stealing provisions. Then on April 28, 1871, a group made up of approximately 6 Anglo-Americans, 48 Mexican-Americans, and 92 Tohono O'odham natives left the area of Tucson, Arizona, and headed towards the Apache camp here east of Camp Grant. On April 30th, they surrounded that camp. Now, most of the male Apaches in the camp were on a hunting expedition and not at the camp. But at dawn on April 30th, the camp was attacked, mostly by the Tohono O'odham. The Anglo-Americans and Mexican-Americans stayed mostly in the rear and picked off the Apaches who tried to escape. In the end, a total of 144 Native Americans were slaughtered, many of them scalped. All but 8 were women and children. 29 other children were captured and sold to slavery in Mexico. The local Arizona press basically cheered the massacre, but as news traveled back east, most were appalled by the violence. President Grant told the Arizona governor that if he didn't track down, arrest, and put on trial the perpetrators, that he, President Grant, would initiate martial law in Arizona. So in October of 1871, a grand jury indicted 100 of the perpetrators on charges of murder. 2 months later, the trial started and lasted 5 days. It took the jury 19 minutes to pronounce all charged not guilty. Many Western Apache groups left the area in fear of more attacks, and they were never able to regain their ancestral lands here in the San Pedro River Valley. Now, the location of the site of Camp Grant is actually where Central Arizona College here is. And this is kind of the layout of the college. But, you know, the Camp Grant site is, according to all the research I could find, is underneath all here. There's nothing left at Camp Grant, just the marker. So this is where Camp Grant was. So this creek here, that's now dry, this creek bed, 5 miles east of here, on the south side of the creek bed, so probably down where that, not the first hill there, but the second one, past that. This is where the Camp Grant folks put the Native Americans, and they had their camp. And this is where the massacre site was. And the camp was on the south side of the creek bed, about 5 miles east of here, where it met the San Pedro River, where this creek met the San Pedro River. So that's where the massacre site was. That's now private property, so you can't get down there. There's nothing to see anyway. But that is where the Native American camp was. So that's going to do it, ladies and gentlemen, for this story about Camp Grant and the massacre that occurred here. I showed you a couple books earlier, a few minutes ago, and if you're interested in the Indian Wars or the forts that were built around the American Southwest specifically, I encourage you to check those books out. Do your own research. Now, there's a few historians, more than a few actually, that believe that the massacre that occurred here at Camp Grant resulted in other massacres by the Apache specifically in other parts of Arizona, kind of a retaliatory massacres that occurred in a few places. And we're going to check those out eventually. We got a couple mapped out already, but as our travels get us to those areas, we'll do stories on those. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. I hope you enjoy these little history lessons. I certainly do. I'm learning a lot as we travel through the deserts here and finding these little places that you don't really hear about, actually. So anyway, appreciate you taking time to watch, and we will keep doing these as we stumble across them. And we will see you next time on Discover This.